One of the most interesting stories to unfold in photography is probably the remarkable work of Vivian Maier. The nanny-turned-photographer left an incredible amount of eye-catching images, shocking even professional photographers. Vivian was born in 1926, and she worked for 4 decades as a nanny, but in private, she enjoyed being a street photographer. Now, a new exhibition at Today Art Museum in Beijing seeks to take visitors from China also on a journey into the lonely, mysterious world of the legendary Vivian Maier and the rich spiritual world from the 1950s to the 1980s, captured by her lens. Earlier, I talked to Jessie Zhang and Anna Morin, who is a curator of this exhibition, A Hidden Genius, Vivian Maier. Let's listen to our conversation. It was fun. And I'm joined by Jessica Zhang, director of the Today Art Museum and co-curator of The Hidden Genius, Vivian Maier, and Anna Morin, who's the director of D-Chroma Photography and also co-curator of A Hidden Genius, Vivian Maier. What a show, in a way, of a woman who can achieve so much without being the big name of her generation. Tell me more, Anna, about this exhibition. What makes her, Vivian Maier, such a legend?
Well, this case is a very specific case in history of photography. There's no other. And this show at Today's Art Museum is the first show in China represent with a specific part of her archive, which is a self-portrait. I mean, the best show probably we ever had about the self-portrait. And the case is specific because it gathers 3 aspects. First, we have a huge archive of 100,020 pictures, which is a huge part of her archive. Second thing, it's the mystery of Vivian Maier. Vivian Maier is still, surrounded by something really mysterious that makes her case really attractive. And third thing is that all her archive was destined to disappear. So the discovery is also something really special.
What about to you, Jessica? You showed me around earlier in the exhibition. I'm sure beyond that you have something to say why she's such a legend, even to many Chinese viewers.
Yes. So besides she being such an extraordinary photographer, there's such a variety of reasons that makes her really an icon of street photographer of that era. First of all, she's a nanny. So she's this working class, pretty much invisible or ignored in the society at the time. And she took over, like Anne said, over 100,000 negatives, but only 5% of them, roughly, are printed by herself. And also she's, a self-taught photographer, female photographer at the time, which is very rare. And the way people discover her work is quite a story itself, that how they discovered her work after she passing away through the warehouse auction sales. So, and also, of course, the controversy about, the intellectual property rights of her works. And there's so many puzzles, and I think making all of these parts, making the whole story a mystery. And that's why we named the show A Hidden Genius, Vivian Maier.
One of the things is that why she is being, she's being such a silent name and yet be able to being so talented of her generation and capture so much dramatic moments of history in a way.
Yes, what is fascinating in all that story is that, well, she was no one. She was someone who took part of the invisibles, as Jessica said, and she took part of the black face of the reverse of the American dream. And at that time, the American dream was about to disappear. I mean, all that people, the richness, wellness, all that beautiful white smiles, representing something that Vivian did not took part of.
Yes.
And finally, I think she really documented that times, the other temporality of the society. And it's behind her, you know, there's a lot of people that could be Vivian Maier, because suddenly in history of photography, we have an amateur. We had other cases like Jacques-Henri Lartigue, for example, who was kind of amateur. But she demonstrates us that there's other kind of photographers that could fit in history of photography. And that's really fascinating. And she was a nanny, and she was a woman, and she was an immigrated, and she was no one. And all her work, and specifically this exhibition at today's Art Museum about a self-portrait, is a question of identity of women in the 60s in US.
Back in the 1960s in the West, there was such a generation, the Beat generation in a way, how they see the world and how they've been treated by the world and how they've been changing the world. And Vivian Maier, who captured that moment with, you know, so many different characters and different moments, help us to understand it better. But it also makes us think about today, Anna. You know, we are at another very interesting and dramatic juncture. A lot of things could change in this direction or that direction. It's so much like what she experienced of her generation in a way. Anna.
I think the work of Vivian announced a radical change in our society that appears right now with the digital era. The specific part of the work of Vivian is about self-representation. Since 20 years, since the mobile phone appears, we are the witness of a phenomenon that is really, I mean, on my side, it's worrying, because it seems like people need, through self-representation, selfies, self-portraits, to find the proof that they exist and that they are alive. In the case of Vivian, the necessity to represent herself was in a way to declare that she was there at that time when she took each pictures. But now, in our society, young people have an excess of self-representation, and for me, that means there's a crisis of identity in our world right now.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it. Jessica, I know you saw a lot of Chinese viewers going to the exhibition. Tell me more about how is her generation, you know, in the United States could echo with this current generation of Chinese who certainly is experiencing quite some dramatic changes in the world.
She was born in 1926, so she's, you know, in the 20s, she's born right before the Great Depressions, and she's witnessed pretty much the Second World War, the civil rights movements, the feminist movement, the Cold War, and September 11, and also all these technology innovation and advancements. So she's really cares about news, and she's a hoarder of newspapers, as you can see from her documentary.
That's right.
She really also has a strong local, you know, social like opinion, and she even questioned people in her documentary, like, oh, why don't you have a political opinion? You should have an opinion. Quite a, you know, rare, this lady, such an independent lady from, you know, how we see women now, but so rare in her time.
Yeah.
So I think really through her work you can see a kind of chronicle, but also sometimes random depiction of typical working class during her time. Photography in China is it's quite niche. So this time we brought Vivian Maier's show for the first time in China, and we're really surprised and happy to see such a big crowd and so many interests.
Vivian Maier, according to both the documentary and some of the oral history recounts, are a lone wolf in a way. She enjoys solitude. We do not know much about her, that's why. Jessica, China was quite a traditional society for women. Of course, since the new China was founded in 1949, things have changed much from feudal society, jump into a modern society. But now people have also been talking about how much progress have we been making. For women particularly, Jessica, I know you, a young woman from China, you studied in the US, and now you're coming back and working in the art. But I'm sure you have some thoughts about this, women being quote unquote alone, or enjoy the space of solitude in a society that is still moving and evolving. What is it like, Vivian Maier today for the Chinese women in a way?
Yeah, I find her very inspiring, not just to artists and photographers, but to all of us, women or anyone in the society, because I think she's been single, like Anne said, throughout her life. She never had children or family, and she never even had any friends, but she just really dedicated her whole life to photography, and that's really makes her so extraordinary and fascinating for us, and so inspirational. And I think even though she was single, I don't think she is lonely. I think she's really, and like Anne said earlier, she really enjoys creating works and taking photos, and that's her passion and what she pursued for all her life and wholeheartedly. And she just spent such a great deal of time to pursue her passion, and I think in a way that she's living maybe even a fuller life than a lot of people who are, sometimes, in each area there are people who are lost and confused. But Vivian Maier really knows who she was and what she wants to do, and she did it and really put in all her time and energy towards it. So I really envy her.
Yeah, she's having a very rich life, shall we put it that way. She has a very different world, her own world in a way that we can finally share. Vivian Maier, to many, is an unknown name until in recent decades. But her work is absolutely extraordinary. So that put me to a question about women artists. Most of the women artists, if I could ever generalize, is relatively not necessarily doing much self-advocating. I mean, except a few very strong voices. And I see in Vivian Maier, in a way, of course, that's what she chose to be. But on the other hand, women artists and women in different areas come forward one step further, step up. That to me is also fascinating in the art world, for example, photography, contemporary art. Anna, your thoughts?
While Jessica was talking a few minutes ago, I remember, of course, Virginia Woolf. And Virginia Woolf said in a way that woman opens ways to the next one and the next one, because there's a woman who was able to do something, the next one can go further. And in that case, Vivian is a very strange case, because I can talk in history of photography, trajectory of women are very short.
Yes.
And however, they contribute to settle the specificity of history of photography, their archive disappear. right now we have a case in Europe which is really fascinating, which is Margaret Watkins. And it's a same thing. I mean, the archive disappeared during 60 years, and suddenly it came up to the visibility because history, usually the currents of history takes the archives of women photographers out. And in a way, I'm very glad that Vivian Maier appears, and she came to stay in history of photography. She settled next to the best and most important names such as Robert Frank, Lee Friedlander, and all that people. Because at that time, women photographers need to have a male figure, not very far from them, to sustain their career. Vivian did not. She did it alone, and
Yes.
she one of the very few in history of photography. That's why it's a very interesting case.
Jessica?
Women artists are rare in that generation. Not, you know, to point out the women photographers like, and most of them like Diane Arbus or Sally Mann, and they don't come from wealthy families. They're usually coming from at least well-off middle-class families, because photography also not just expectations for the photographers, but also the amount of financial requirements to
Right.
put into cameras or prints and printing them, and you know, all these equipments. So it really constrains, I guess, a lot of the women photographers to make consistent works, and also also the volumes of their work are a lot less than male photographers or artists at the same time.
Right.
But for how what makes Vivian Maier such an exceptional photographer is that she took over 100,000 negatives, and that's just such a volume that it really means that she's been taking photos almost every day of her life incessantly, and that's just really, finding her is really a shock to the world, for sure.
Absolutely. You know, sometimes we learn other stories, in this case of Vivian Maier, but we all try to find something that belongs to us, one corner or two of that story, that we have echoes as well in our hearts. So on that note, I want to thank both of you, Anna Morin and Jessica Zhang, for putting such a wonderful exhibition, Hidden Genius of Vivian Maier, to the viewers around the world, and this time in China.